Istanbul, the Vatican, Switzerland. 3 cities, 3 continents, 3 separate offers of a meeting place, any of them, all of them, whichever one Vladimir Putin would agree to travel to. Volodymyr Zelensky put them all on the table this week. He said Ukraine is ready to meet at any of these locations, at any time, starting next Monday. He asked for one thing in return: Putin. Not a delegation, not an aide, not Vladimir Medinsky, the hardline nationalist who has now led Russia's peace team to Istanbul twice in 3 years and produced nothing both times. Putin, the man who launched this war, the man who can end it. And here is what Putin said in response. He appeared in a video call with senior Russian officials. He was talking about Ukraine's recent drone and railway strikes inside Russia, attacks he called terrorist acts. He looked at his officials, and he said this: "How can any such summit meetings be conducted in such circumstances? What shall we talk about? What is there to talk about?" That is the answer to an offer of Istanbul, the Vatican, and Switzerland. That is the response to a man who flew across borders, who sent his defense minister and foreign minister and presidential chief of staff to a meeting, who has been ready, consistently, demonstrably, at personal cost, to end this war. What is there to talk about? And the war goes on. Part 1. The offer. What Zelensky actually put on the table. Let's be precise about what Zelensky offered, because the media summarizes it as Zelensky wants to meet Putin. But the full offer is more generous, more flexible, and more revealing than that summary suggests. After Istanbul's second round of talks collapsed, after the Medinsky delegation produced nothing except an agreement to exchange dead bodies, Zelensky stood before cameras and laid out a complete framework. Here it is, in full. Ceasefire first. An immediate, unconditional cessation of hostilities. Not a 48-hour humanitarian pause. Not a Victory Day truce that Russia violates 16,000 times, but a real ceasefire. Ukraine is specifically asking for 30 days, which is what the US and European allies have been pushing for. Then a leaders' summit. Putin and Zelensky in person, possibly with Trump as a co-mediator, a concession to Russia's apparent desire not to deal with Zelensky alone. The summit would not be to sign a final peace deal, but to establish that both sides have mutual understanding and willingness to work toward one. Then extended negotiations. With the ceasefire holding and leaders having met, the harder questions, territory, security guarantees, Ukraine's international status, would be addressed through a formal diplomatic process. And the venue? Ukraine is offering total flexibility. Istanbul, the city Russia itself chose. The Vatican, one of the most neutral, sacred, internationally respected settings imaginable. Switzerland, the traditional home of neutral international diplomacy. Zelensky explained why the ceasefire must come before the summit, not after. Because if we meet and there is no mutual understanding, no willingness or vision on how to end this, then the ceasefire would end that same day. He was being honest about the risks. He was saying, "I don't want a summit that fails, because a failed summit ends whatever fragile truce we might build around it." He wants a summit that has a foundation, that has a ceasefire to protect it, that has US mediation to guarantee it. This is not a maximalist demand. This is not an ultimatum. This is the most reasonable, structured, flexible peace framework either side has offered in 3 years of this war. And Putin's answer was, what is there to talk about? Part 2. What Putin said and what he revealed. Let's give Putin's answer the full analysis it deserves, because it is, in its own way, one of the most revealing statements of this entire war. How can any such summit meetings be conducted in such circumstances? What shall we talk about? Putin was referring to Ukraine's drone attacks on Russian railway infrastructure, attacks in the Kursk and Bryansk regions that destroyed bridges and derailed a train, killing 7 people. Now let's think carefully about this statement. Putin launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Since then, Russian forces have conducted thousands of strikes on Ukrainian territory, on cities, on power plants, on hospitals, on residential neighborhoods. More than 12,000 Ukrainian civilians have been killed, according to the United Nations. Many times more have been wounded. Millions have been displaced. All of that has been happening continuously, while the two sides have been engaged in peace talks, ceasefire negotiations, prisoner exchanges, and diplomatic meetings. Russia has not said it cannot negotiate while it is bombing Ukrainian cities. Russia does not say, "How can we conduct meetings in such circumstances when its missiles hit a Ukrainian maternity hospital?" But Ukraine strikes a railway bridge in Kursk, a military infrastructure target inside Russia, and suddenly Putin cannot imagine how conversations are possible. The double standard is so stark, so complete, so utterly transparent, that it functions as its own evidence. Putin is not refusing to meet Zelensky because of the railway strikes. Putin was never going to meet Zelensky. The railway strikes are a convenient excuse, reached for after the decision not to attend was already made. Former Russian diplomat Boris Bondarev said it publicly. Putin wriggled out of the difficult diplomatic situation that he had gotten himself into. The talk about circumstances and terrorist acts is the explanation for a decision that had already been reached. But here's what Putin's statement reveals beyond the excuse. It reveals that Putin has no answer to Zelensky's offer. Because if Putin engaged the substance, if he responded to Istanbul, the Vatican, Switzerland, he would have to either accept a meeting that he finds politically difficult or publicly reject peace talks that Russia itself proposed. What is there to talk about sidesteps that impossible choice. It sounds like a statement of grievance, but functions as a non-answer. Zelensky offered to meet anywhere. Putin said, "What is there to talk about?" And the war goes on. Part 3. The geography of this offer. Why it matters that he said anywhere. There is something profound in the word anywhere. It is not a small concession. It is a remarkable one. Leaders do not typically offer to meet anywhere. They negotiate venues. They argue about symbolism. They insist on locations that project the right image to their domestic audiences. Zelensky is offering Istanbul, the city Russia proposed. Fine, come there. He is offering the Vatican, one of the most politically and spiritually neutral spaces on earth. If Russia objects to secular Western settings, the Vatican carries its own weight and its own quiet authority. He is offering Switzerland, the traditional home of international mediation, a country with no NATO membership, no military stake in the outcome, no political reason to favor either side. 3 venues, 3 different kinds of neutrality, each one designed to remove any possible Russian objection about the setting. And he is offering them at any time from next Monday, not eventually, not when conditions are right, not after some precondition is met. Next week. Any of these places, come. The flexibility is deliberate. Zelensky is removing every excuse except the one Russia cannot say out loud. The excuse Russia cannot say out loud is this: Putin does not recognize Zelensky as a legitimate head of state and does not want to appear on equal footing with him on the world stage. A current Russian diplomat speaking anonymously to the Moscow Times was explicit. Zelensky is only suitable for signing a capitulation, period. That is Russia's actual position. Zelensky is not a leader to negotiate with. He is someone to receive Russia's terms. And that position, revealed in the gap between Russia's public offer of talks and its refusal to actually attend them, is the real answer to, what is there to talk about? There is nothing to talk about, in Russia's view, because there is no conversation possible with a man Russia considers already defeated. But Ukraine has not been defeated. The war has not ended, and the man Russia refuses to meet is still standing. Part 4. The numbers behind the offer. Why this matters so much. Let me give you the numbers that put Zelensky's offer in context. The war has now lasted more than 4 years. That is longer than the Soviet Union's involvement in World War II, the conflict Russia celebrates every May 9th as its greatest national achievement. Russian forces are advancing in Donetsk at approximately 70 meters per day. At that rate, without a ceasefire, without a negotiated settlement, Russia would need years more to capture all of Donetsk, at catastrophic cost to both sides. The United Nations has confirmed more than 12,000 Ukrainian civilian deaths since the full-scale invasion began. The real number, including military casualties, is orders of magnitude higher. Estimates of Russian military losses alone run into the hundreds of thousands. Ukraine has struck targets over 1,000 kilometers inside Russia. The country that was supposed to fall in 72 hours has developed a military capability that reaches deep into Russian territory. Russia's economy is under the deepest sanctions pressure since the Cold War. Interest rates in Russia are at historic highs. Consumer prices are rising. The costs of sustaining this war are real and growing. And through all of this, all 4 years, all the casualties, all the economic damage, what has been produced diplomatically? 2 rounds of Istanbul talks that lasted barely an hour and produced nothing. A 3-day ceasefire that was violated 16,071 times. A prisoner exchange that Zelensky prioritized over military strikes, and which Russia has still not fully honored. And a Russian president who proposed talks and then said there was nothing to talk about. Zelensky's offer of Istanbul, the Vatican, Switzerland, of ceasefire before summit, of U.S. mediation, of immediate availability, is the most serious peace proposal on the table. Putin's "what is there to talk about" is not a response. It is a rejection disguised as a question. Part 5. The world that is watching, and what it sees. Let's zoom out, because this is not just a story about 2 leaders. It is a story about what the world is witnessing. European leaders, the UK, France, Germany, Poland, the Baltic states, have been watching this week with increasing alarm. They issued an ultimatum: 30-day ceasefire or sanctions. Russia responded by proposing talks. The talks produced nothing, and now Russia is saying there is nothing to talk about. French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot said simply that an empty chair was left where Putin should have sat. He said Putin was dragging his feet and, in all evidence, does not want to enter into these peace discussions. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte was in Antalya for the ministers' meeting. He had nothing encouraging to say about Russia's engagement. The U.S., through Secretary of State Rubio, acknowledged that the talks had produced no progress. Trump said nothing is going to happen until he and Putin meet. And Ukraine? Ukraine sent its defense minister and foreign minister to Istanbul, twice. Both times ready to agree to a ceasefire. Both times facing a Russian delegation that put non-starters on the table. The world is watching a pattern. Ukraine offers flexibility. Russia offers theater. Ukraine proposes venues. Russia sends substitutes. Ukraine agrees to prisoner exchanges. Russia agrees in principle and then creates complications. Ukraine says, "Meet us at Istanbul, the Vatican, Switzerland." Russia says, "What is there to talk about?" The world sees this. European capitals see it. Eventually, even Washington will see it clearly enough that the diplomatic cover Russia has been exploiting will thin. Part 6. The weight of "the war goes on." Let me slow down for a moment, because this title contains 3 words that deserve to be felt, not just stated. The war goes on. In the 24 hours surrounding the Istanbul talks, while delegations were exchanging documents and journalists were waiting in the spring sunshine, at least 5 Ukrainian civilians were killed and 29 were wounded in the eastern regions where Russia is advancing. 5 people who are not alive anymore, 29 who are injured. On a day when peace talks were happening, the war does not observe diplomatic meetings. Russian forces continue to advance in Donetsk at 70 meters a day, at catastrophic human cost, toward cities where Ukrainian civilians are sheltering in basements. Russian drones continue to strike Ukrainian energy infrastructure, the power grid, the heating systems, the water treatment facilities that millions of Ukrainians depend on. Ukrainian soldiers continue to die on a front line that hasn't moved dramatically in over a year. And Zelensky, who has sat through the Istanbul talks and watched them produce a body swap agreement and nothing else, who has offered Istanbul and the Vatican and Switzerland and received "what is there to talk about," goes home to Kiev, where the war is still happening. Closing. Anywhere, anytime, Nobody came. Here is the image I want to leave you with. Volodymyr Zelensky, in military green as always, tells the world he will meet Vladimir Putin at Istanbul, the Vatican, or Switzerland. He says Ukraine is ready from next Monday. He says he wants a ceasefire first, so that whatever they build has a foundation. He is offering everything except surrender. And Putin, in Moscow, surrounded by his officials, watching footage of a derailed train, says, "How can any such summit meetings be conducted in such circumstances? What shall we talk about?" What is there to talk about? That question, asked by the man who launched this war, who proposed these talks, who sent Zelensky to Istanbul twice with the same failed demands, is the most honest thing Putin has said in this entire conflict. Because he's right that there's nothing to talk about. Not because peace is impossible, but because Putin is not looking for peace. He is looking for terms, his terms, announced, not negotiated, delivered, not discussed. And Zelensky, who offered Istanbul, the Vatican, Switzerland, who has been showing up at every meeting and flying to every city and sending every official he has, is done pretending that performing engagement is the same as seeking peace. He offered to meet anywhere. Putin said, "What is there to talk about?" The war goes on. And the world now knows who answered and who didn't.